Hello, so I'm going to present on Parmalat and Ferrero and the similarities and differences within the company. So first start out with Parmalat. They were a dairy, well still are a dairy and food corporation founded by Callisto Tanzi in 1961. And they started out as a family business until they eventually had a downfall in 2003. It was found they had a 14 billion euro hole in their accounts, but it was estimated that in around 1990 their fraudulent activity started. They had false financial statements tied to a shell company in the Cayman Islands, so essentially the shell company was how they hid all their debt. They created fake assets, moved debt off the balance sheets and or disguised them as equity. And they inflated their revenue by fake transactions. So as we can see, Parmalat had a huge downfall and they committed a lot of fraudulent activity that eventually led to the demise of their company. They are still around today, but the CEO is in prison and they were eventually convicted of all of their crimes. And as we can see here, in around January 2004, that's when the stock price for Parmalat significantly decreased. So as we can see, in January 2002 they were doing well with their stock, and then once all of this came out of their activity and the fraud they were committing, their stock went all the way completely plummeted. And part of this is also because they had over 100,000 investors and stockholders in the company that lost all of their money due to the crimes they committed. So obviously, as you know, who's going to want to buy stock in a company that's in billions of dollars in debt and totally going down the drain? And then a little background on Ferrero. They're owner and maker of Nutella, Tic Tac, Moncherry, Ferrero Rocher, and Kinder, which I'm sure we all have had or one of their products. I know I love Nutella, and Ferrero Rochers are great too. The CEO is Lapo Civiletti. They're the second biggest chocolate producer in the world. They're based in Alba, Italy. They sold $12.5 billion US last year. And their competitors include Mars Inc., which make Snickers and M&Ms. So similarities and differences between Parmalat and Ferrero. Similarities are they're both Italian companies. They're in the food industry, so although Parmalat is more specifically in the dairy industry and Ferrero is in the chocolate and sweets industry, they are both in the food industry, and more specifically they're both Italian companies, so that indirectly makes them competitors, and they're also family businesses. However, they are different. Parmalat had many financial struggles, so as I said in the slide before, they had a lot of problems and were eventually convicted, whereas Ferrero has never had any of these problems. I also think part of the reason Parmalat had so many issues was environmental factors and different things affecting the CEO, and I think part of that may have been just his moral compass. I mean, you have to have many different kinds of values and morals to convict or commit crimes like that, and to know how to be able to commit fraudulent crimes, I think are very different morals than somebody like me would hold. And I would think somebody like the Ferrero CEO, as they seem to not have any troubles now. And like I said, the main difference is Parmalat committed very big crimes, whereas there's nothing come out about Ferrero about that. However, there are problems that could arise in Ferrero, like any company, as it did in Parmalat. Although, like I said, I think a great deal of it had to do with the CEO, Tanzi. And like that, the CEO becoming too powerful. So I think within Parmalat, Tanzi used his power and just did whatever he could. Like I said, many factors, possibly his moral compass, could have been reasons for that, along with environmental factors. But definitely in Parmalat, the CEO did become too powerful and just used his power to create all these, like the shell companies, and worked with different investment bankers to cover up debt on the balance sheet. So things like that the CEO was able to do. That it could happen in Ferrero because the CEO does have power. So really, a CEO becoming too powerful could happen in any corporation, such as Ferrero. They could also commit fraudulent activity, although that's not the end goal of any corporation. One thing could go south or turn the wrong way, and a company could start doing that, which I think Parmalat did, because as soon as they started going south, they could have done something, but they just ran with it and committed a lot more crimes, and as that could happen to anyone, so it could happen to Ferrero, that they want to make money and choose fraud. Unlikely, I think, of that happening, but it's a possibility. And then hiding debt within shell companies, so Parmalat did that with the shell company in the Cayman Islands, and it's possible Ferrero could acquire shell companies that they hide debt, and like I said, I doubt that would happen, but it, of course, is always a possibility. So then, in order to prevent this, the checks and balances to prevent issues within Ferrero and maybe some things that lacked within Parmalat, having an advisory board to keep the CEO and CFO in check. So that's very important for publicly traded companies, that their governance be in check. So an advisory board being separate from the CEO or CFO is really important, because they have certain responsibilities that will not allow them, CEO or CFO, to become too powerful. And that's a really important thing, that they're independent of each other, because it's kind of a conflict of interest when the CEO and the president of the board are the same person. So checks and balances, just like the US government, they need to be separate, and I think keeping them in line and in check would prevent any fraudulent activity happening, as part of the president of the board's responsibilities include finances and making sure that's all in line. And again, like I said, the president of the board being independent, because it's just checks and balances, keeps everything the way it needs to be, and there's responsibilities of the president that I think would not allow the CEO to get too powerful, like happened in Parmalat. And if Ferrero has any shell companies, they need to be closely monitored. So this was a big cover-up and a big deal for Parmalat. So if Ferrero has any shell companies, they need to be closely monitored so that no debt is hidden, because that could happen. So these are just similarities and differences between these two companies, and how a checks and balances system within companies is really important, like an advisory board that can keep CEOs, CFOs in line and in check, and that would not allow fraudulent activity like Parmalat to happen. And these are my references. Thank you.